All right. Well, you're probably seeing the floating animated heads that you've been enjoying on Hard No for the past several weeks. We've decided for them to cross the stream and come over onto the main channel on some of our other stuff when we do some commentary or reviews or reaction type of stuff. And so that's what we're going to do today. Is start a process and see how this all works out. So this is all new to us, so bear with us. We'll see how this all works out. But Mike had come across a great article about from Rolling Stone about the 50 worst album covers of all time. And as excited as we are to go through this, we're maybe half as excited as you think we'd be because we're only going to go through 25 of them today. We're going to see how it goes for us. We're going to see what people think in terms of if they're interested in the content, and if it all does okay, we'll finish the job at a later date. Um, Anything you would like to add before we get started, sir?
You have me to finish the job at a later date.
Yes, there's truth to that. Okay, so we'll just kind of get rolling. So this is Rolling Stone's thoughts, and then spoiler. What we'll do at the end is that uh, Mike and I are each going to offer up one album cover that we felt should have been on this list that wasn't, and so that may happen at a later date too. But we'll each have one there. So we'll just start scrolling down to number 50, which is "River of Dreams" by Billy Joel. Thoughts, sir?
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
I had never seen this cover before, and it's funny because I actually just saw it for the first time right before I saw this article. Jimmy, who I do the Brutal Dudes podcast with, I brought up a Billy Joel song that I was less familiar with. I like Billy Joel, but I wouldn't say I'm a big fan. I'm not super familiar with his catalog, just the hits kind of thing. But I always enjoyed them. I had an honors art class in high school, and we were allowed to listen to CDs in there. CDs, kids, were like albums that were put on tiny records that were made out of plastic and shiny. We could listen to CDs if we got them like approved by the school. So this was an arduous process. So it was slow going. So you would get a CD approved and it would take like a month to get the next one approved. So somebody got Billy Joel's greatest hits approved. So we listened to that for at least a month straight every single day. So I got really familiar with a handful of Billy Joel songs and I did enjoy them. So nothing against him as an artist. I don't know his catalog like that. So Jimmy had mentioned a song. So I was scrolling through Spotify and I saw this thing on there. And this is very out of place, even with his other album covers, which tend to just be, somewhat stylized, just photos of him, usually black and white or some sort of stark, you know, kind of thing like that. This is very different. That's what I'll say. And not pleasant to look at. You, sir?
Uh, Echo your comments. Definitely different than his other stuff, which is grittier, black and white, New Yorky. Painted by his then wife, Christy Brinkley, which doesn't help. It's still still unpleasant to look at. So we'll stop looking at it. Boom, REO Speedwagon, a band that harkens from my neck of the woods. Uh, and we've got a lot going on here. We got a panther, a cougar, I guess, a few
All of
other
the
things.
cats.
Yes, lots of cats, lots of different kinds of cats. Um, lots of open shirts. I was never a fan of REO Speedwagon. I think also the unpleasant, not really sold on it to begin with, and then choosing the clip art leopard border on it to me screams trailer park. so so your
Yeah,
thoughts?
this is it's so thoughts on REO Speedwagon as a band first. Also not really a fan of them. I do have a weird soft spot though. So my first concert, and this is going to be brought up again on this list later. My first concert, real concert, if you don't count the Ninja Turtles live tour, my first real concert that I went to was a package tour that had come around this area. It was in New Jersey, and they had just opened what is the waterfront venue in New Jersey now. I call it that only because it changes name every couple of months at this point because it is located in Camden, New Jersey, which is like the second highest murder per capita place in the country. So every couple of months or so, it changes names. So I have no idea what it's called at the time we're recording this. But at that time, when it first opened, there was a big classic rock tour that came through, and it was Fleetwood Mac, REO Speedwagon, or I'm sorry, not Patty LaBelle, Pat Benatar, and Orleans was the lineup. And there may have been like a local opener or something that played like a second stage off to the side, but those were the main bands on this package tour. So I do have a little bit of a soft spot for REO Speedwagon because they were kind of my first concert, or at least they were part of my first concert that I went to. Um, that being said, I don't listen to their music. And this album cover, it's a product of its time. A lot of album covers look like this. It's hard to look at just because the composition is terrible and there's a bunch of stuff in there. So it just makes it unpleasant to look at in a different way than the Billy Joel one was.
Yep. Can't argue with that at all. Okay. Syncing up these animated floating heads is like way too time consuming. So now we go to Chuck Berry. Chuck dot dot Berry is on top, which isn't even a good pun. And
No.
and not a pleasant looking to me, not a pleasant looking bowl of ice cream. The strawberries on this look very unnatural and wrong.
Yeah. This should have been a slam dunk cover because it's got that like 1950s diner kind of thing going on, but you can't really see the diner. The most of the cover image is taken up by this bowl of what at first glance I thought was like terrible salad because the lighting is so bad in this. It's very unappealing looking. It's not poorly done in the same way the first two were. It's just very unappetizing looking food. So it's just as much of an off-putting thing. And I don't really have too much of an opinion one way or another on Chuck Berry. I know, he was a trailblazer and I respect that, but I'm not super familiar with his music. So I don't have a
Uh,
story for him like the other two.
yeah, yeah, I know. It does look like there's maybe some lettuce jammed into this ice cream, which
It
I guess
does,
would
yeah.
be a healthier way to go. so, so Chuck's maybe looking out for us. There we go. Queen getting very, very close to the end of their recording career. I think this is maybe their second to last album, The Miracle. Um, your thoughts?
I mean, I don't like it, but so I guess in Queen's defense, well, first, let me just say, I think a lot of Queen album covers are bad. If you peruse their albums, I think most of their covers are not good and not pleasant to look at. They're not well designed. That's how you know Queen's music was good because they're not necessarily the best looking guys in the world. And I'm not trying to judge. I look like a serial killer. So I'm not, I look like a wanted poster with like a police sketch on it. So I'm not judging. They're not necessarily the best looking guys in the world. And I think their album covers look bad, most of them, include especially, I would say, my favorite is A Kind of Magic. That looks terrible. It looks like if there was a Queen Vegas slot machine that was made in the 70s, that would be the artwork on it. And that's my favorite Queen album. So what I will say in their favor is this image has actually been done by other bands as well. This thing or things like this. Um, yeah, it never looks good. Don't do this. Metallica did this. Crowbar did this. A bunch of bands in the 70s did this. Don't do this. But I will say what's more off-putting about this one than the other ones is it looks like there's some sort of dead animal laid across their heads, the way the hair interconnects, with the tail falling down around, cradling Brian May's face, sort of framing it. So it's a little worse than the other ones who've done it, but I can't hold it against Queen when there's a bunch of other bands who've done variations on this.
Yeah, it's off-putting, kind of raise your fist and yell level off-putting to me.
Yeah, yeah.
The and I guess probably my biggest grumble against it too is that Roger Taylor's probably my favorite band member on Queen. And he didn't even get an eye in this on this album cover.
Yeah, yeah.
It's he Brian May gets one eye, but Freddie and John Deacon each get two. Seems totally unfair that or Raj is zero eyes on this album cover.
He is eyeless.
Totally unfair. But it's a really good album. All right. Yeah, I had to go back and double check to make sure this one wasn't in my record collection. It's not. It's by the Coup. Uh, not the Who. That's probably why I was confused. uh, called Party Music. And you can't really go wrong without, I mean, I believe a mattress manufacturer tried to do a Twin Towers toppling sale at one point in time, which didn't go over too well. That video is a real interesting one. I think never a good idea to do this, and so and even if you were going to do it, it's horribly executed, which I still wouldn't do. But execution wouldn't have saved what was already a horrible idea. But it's a horrible idea done horribly. Is my assessment of this. You?
So I'm not going to defend the Coup because I've never been a fan of theirs. I've heard this album. I remember when this came out. So there was there was a weird number of things that came out right before 9/11 that had the Twin Towers blowing up on them. Like a weird number of them. So it wasn't just the Coup. And to their credit, just before somebody angry, the one Coup fan who watches the show leaves an angry comment, the Photoshop work is bad on purpose. This is meant to be like a social commentary thing, and over the top Photoshop rap album covers were a thing at that time, so that's kind of what they're mocking. So I understand that. It doesn't mean it's good or clever. It just I do get where it's coming from. Sort of like Interstellar. I understand Interstellar. That movie just sucks. It's not because I don't understand it. It's because the movie sucks. So I get what they're doing. I still don't like it. Um, as it is weird. It's not fun to look at, and of course now it has the connotation of 9/11 because this came out like a week before 9/11 happened. But it wasn't just them. Vanilla Ice had was releasing it was supposed to be a double album and it ended up coming out as a single disc. But the double album was supposed to be a rock album and a rap album. One was called Scabs, the other was called Bomb the System, and they had to recall that album and reprint the back sleeves to take Bomb off of the back of it because stores wouldn't carry it. This came out. There was a Superman comic about issues at the Twin Towers and stuff like that, that all were weeks leading up to 9/11. It's just a weird coincidence. So I think the inclusion on this list is partially because they're drawing the parallels to 9/11, but this actually came out first.
Gotcha. Yeah. Fair enough on that.
And
Yeah. Also,
they did put out a different album cover also too. This was pulled and they replaced it with a different cover, which was equally terrible. So
yeah, smart move on that. Yeah, and the other collateral damage on 9/11 is that Alice Cooper was going to be hosting on, I think, the Discovery Channel, uh, a show about building implosions that
oh
was
really?
going to air the next day, or it was gonna within the week of 9/11. And I was all excited to watch that, coming up till that day, and then became a little less interested in building implosions. But they decided now wasn't the right time. I don't think it ever saw the light of day at all. So, a little trivia for you there, folks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Mosquito. Um, it's got a Garbage Pail Kid vibe going,
Yeah,
guess a little bit.
yeah,
Um, little bit of Nirvana.
yeah. I was gonna say I don't know why, but there is a thing in alternative music of putting babies on covers. I I don't know why. I don't. I'm not a fan. I mean, I don't like hate babies or anything like that. I don't get the appeal of putting a baby on an album cover that doesn't fit. Like the only time it worked in my opinion, Notorious B.I.G.'s first album had a baby on the cover because the album was called Ready to Die. So that was the idea of being, or I'm sorry, uh, the idea of being, born and you're just being put out there in the world to die at some point. So that fit with it. This, I mean, there's a mosquito, but the mosquito could be biting anybody, I guess. And as a Garbage Pail Kid myself,
I know.
and for anybody who doesn't know, I am actually the model of a Garbage Pail Kid card when they did their Gangsters, Pimps, and Killers line. I was one of the killers in it. So there's me as a Garbage Pail Kid wielding machete. That even ended up in a Garbage Pail Kids music video. There's a little animated version of me running around with a machete. It's one of two animated versions of me that exist out there. Also in an intrinsic music video, playing in his band, and we're all animated as Tron-like characters. So that was interesting too. So I don't like this, but not as much as the other ones.
Yeah, yeah. I just I want to move on. Huh. So this is one, and I really think this is an assessment of we're talking about the art and the album cover. We're not talking about what's behind the album cover. Like
Hmm.
Miracle's a good example, but pretty great album, but that's what we're talking about. So so this is one I think that I think Rolling Stone uh didn't strictly because to me, this is a egotistical album cover.
Sure.
This is I'm crazy full of myself. But I really don't see a whole lot wrong with this beyond what was already known to be wrong with Michael Jackson about.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely, especially this album in particular, that creeps into it a lot. So he did this, it was like a double album, Past, Present, and Future, which had like hits on there. He's doing, first off, for anybody who doesn't know, he's doing an exact thing that Frank Sinatra did. It was actually Frank Sinatra's last hit record. It's the one with New York, New York on there. Frank Sinatra was in a slump in his career. He had a surprise hit to everybody with New York, New York. So he decided to repackage some old songs mixed with some new songs. And in Frank Sinatra's case, concept songs about a sci-fi future where he, having conquered music on Earth, goes to another planet to sing for aliens. I'm not kidding. Go listen to that album. It is ridiculous. But this had already happened, this past, present, and future thing. So he was copying the Frank Sinatra thing without the sci-fi bullshit. So people didn't like that. Frank Sinatra fans didn't like that he was blatantly copying what somebody else had already done. The album cover's not great. This was around the time accusations were really flaring up about him. There was also some anti-Semitic lyrics on one of the new songs that was included on this album, which eventually they pulled the album and censored the song for. So there was just a lot of strikes against this record right from the start. But to Kelly's point, I don't think the problem is the way it was done. I think it's everything else.
Yeah, yeah, which to me keeps it off this list because this is like all the rest of that's pretty horrible.
Yeah,
But
it's all pretty bad. Michael
spill over.
Jackson's anti-Semitic slurs and maybe some other stuff with kids and weirdly copying the worst mistake Frank Sinatra ever made.
The Village People Renaissance.
You know what? I'll say this is bad, sure, but I don't even think this is the worst Village People cover, if we're being honest.
Mm, it's close. I think it's gonna. I think it needs to be under consideration for sure.
I don't know. I think you should go look up some other Village People covers.
Oh,
I don't think this is their worst album cover.
I don't know.
This
It's
is
pretty.
actually during their period when they were toning down their outfits a little.
Oh yeah, super successful there. They've really done a
Yeah.
great job.
I mean, compared to the full on costumes that it was prior to this. But this really just looks like a lot of other 80s album covers. That's my biggest problem with it. That font, the pink background, like neon colors and that font and everything were pretty common. So I don't like it, but I don't think this should be on the worst list. There's other things you could pick apart.
Yeah, this to me is kind of like when the Kiss Dynasty era when they started to move and they kind of changed all their costuming and cut their hair. So
Yeah.
it's really around it was Dynasty and the Elder. Actually, I think the Elder is when the music from the Elder was when they were wanting to be taken more serious as artists instead of the Walmart of rock and roll. And the this smacks of the same thing where it's like, well, we're
Imagine
just
you're the least respected artist in disco. You're trying to save that image.
yeah,
You're a novelty disco band and are the least respected of them.
there you go. Okay, another huge head scratcher for me. Rolling Stone, don't know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Kind of a snoozer for me, but it's
Yeah,
Tom.
if anything, I just don't care about
Yeah,
the
it's it's the guy whose album it is, being the guy he is,
yeah,
and he's a pretty
just
cool guy.
yeah, he's just standing there. There's some records and stuff behind him. It's a little busy, the album cover, but I mean, if anything, it's just I'm indifferent towards it. It's just a picture of the artist, which is what most Tom Petty album covers are. I would say that Full Moon Fever has a really good album cover, which again is just a picture of him, but it's got a nice clean design, a cool color palette and stuff. So I would say that's this done way better,
Yeah,
but I don't think there's anything wrong with
yeah,
this.
yeah. I think it's a miss on their part, but I mean, it does ring of hey, we need to cover album cover photo. What? Let's look at the let's look at the what just came back from the photo mat. And,
Yeah.
that one will work. Remember when you were looking for that Milli Vanilli album? Oh, all right, Metallica, super close to the Lick the Glove album cover from Spinal Tap. Almost there.
Black on black.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've never liked the album cover. It's the snake from the Gadsden flag and their band name in black on a black album cover. So you can just kind of see the highlights around the letters. I've never really liked it. It's their most successful album and one of the best selling albums in history. I know it's not in the top couple because that's volleys back and forth between Michael Jackson and the Eagles, but I know it's like top 10 selling albums. So, I mean, people seem to like it, I guess. But it's I don't like it, but it's fitting for Metallica, not because they didn't have good album covers, but this was their first major label album, is a lot more polished than their other stuff. So I think had they gone with a really polished album cover, it would have hurt their credibility even more than the fans who felt that they were selling out already. So I actually think this was the right move for them to make something that's kind of super simplistic and dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Boring. I don't know. Worst. Definitely boring. This seems wrong.
I, this
this
is
seems
weird.
this seems wrong on like a lot of levels. I'm unfamiliar with this work. Not that I'm a big Rod Stewart fan, but I unfortunately until this moment had never really come across this. Um, an old raincoat will never let you down. Um, what the hell is going on here? I have an idea what's going on here, but I'm hoping it's just my warped brain. So,
I mean, when I saw this, I was just like, so comparing this to the other album covers was tough because while obviously I'm familiar with who Rod Stewart is and his hits and stuff like that, I don't think I've ever listened to a Rod Stewart album, so I don't know what his album covers look like, to be fair. So I don't know how out of place this looks. Um, yeah, it's not good. So even ignoring that it looks like an abduction scene that's happening here. So even ignoring that, it's not good. Like it's not a good picture. It's kind of blurry, it's kind of soft. There's not a lot of detail and stuff. So it's not good. And then you look at the image, which seems like Rod Stewart, for anybody who's, maybe not watching the video and just listening to our lovely crooning voices, it seems like Rod Stewart dressed as a flasher. So you can imagine, what I'm talking about there. Uh, Chasing a child who's running away. That that seems about what's happening here. And it's kind of blurry. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
And, it's because it's so blurry, it's hard to tell, but um, it doesn't appear that the child's overly distressed. It's hard to tell, but it does appear to be mid abduction on there. And when you have to kind of when you discuss it, and you go, if you set aside this is potentially an abduction going on, that's a flag right there. To kind of go, that's really not something you should set aside. And
let's talk
so
about the composition of this abduction photo.
yes, so loses on a lot of levels. Definite appropriate inclusion on the list. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but Sufjan Stevens do okay on
I'm
that.
not sure.
Um, Javelin, uh, the bubblegumish font with super bad collage.
Yeah, it's a collage with that puff paint stuff with the album title on there. I have to be honest with you, I have no idea who this is or what this sounds like. So maybe this is a great representation of the album. I don't like looking at it though.
No,
And if I saw this in a record store, record stores, kids, or when Spotify used to be backed up on hard copies, and you could go to a place and purchase them one at a time, an album one at a time from there. If I saw this in a record store, and a lot of times I would discover new stuff by flipping through albums and seeing something to look cool and looking at the song titles and things, I wouldn't look at this. So I don't know. This could be great, and this might be an awesome representation of the album, but I wouldn't look at this. Yeah.
nope. I'm just going to echo your comment. I don't like looking at it, and so we're going to move
Yeah.
on. Brad Paisley, time well wasted. Uh, Little Salvador Dali light going on here with a kind of melting clock over uh, someone discovered the ability to take out saturation in different parts of a photo and they wanted to kind of run with that. Um, Multiple layers going on. Pretty unimpressive to me. Feels a lot more like someone was playing with filters and said, that's good enough. That's arty.
I
Uh,
have to think, and I don't know anything about Brad Paisley, but I have to think whether it was him, his partner, his child, whoever it was, somebody took like a intro to Photoshop course at their local library, and somehow that turned into an album cover that was released to the world. Because this is the kind of stuff like playing with the saturation and adding in, clip art and, you know, incorporating it into an image and things like that. I went to art school, and this is the kind of stuff like your first Photoshop class. This is the stuff that they're covering, these sort of basic filters and how to, add images and layers and things like that. It doesn't have to look good. You just have to learn how to do it so that you can make good looking stuff further down the road. That's what this is.
yep. Big hat, no cattle. So, as Randy Newman would say. So I'm not familiar with this group. Um, it's the Beatles, Revolver. Um, So we're kind of, if we're doing the show, we're just kind of going through and giving our kind of immediate reaction to them and commenting on it. So um, I think if we decide we're going to go through the remaining 25 of these, I think I will go back and thoroughly read the little clips so that I know the backstory of some of these. So that I know, hey, the 9/11 shot wasn't done before 9/11. That's kind of important. Um, I'm fighting urges to go to scroll down to the text to find out if this was done by a girlfriend or not. This feels to me like it was either someone in the band who thought they could draw or someone forced upon the band by another band member. But let's just take a look here. Uh, nope, this was actually an artist, Klaus Vorman. Um, bass player more than an artist, though. Uh,
Makes sense.
I think he should stick with his day job.
Yeah. So this is ugly. Uh, it incorporates art, and there's implied air quotes around that word, and some collage photos, like a number of Beatles albums do. So this is, I guess, in line with those. And I would argue that while I've always thought that this was the worst looking of the Beatles album covers, I would argue all of their album covers are good. I don't like any of the Beatles album covers. I think they all kind of look like shit from a design perspective. And before anybody gets all mad just because I don't like the Beatles as a band, I do have a degree in art, and this is poorly done. You would fail if you turn this in as a project. This would be a failure.
I'm not sure we'll do super well in a 4-H competition, actually. And we got George Harrison channeling his inner Paul Stanley, which is a nice thing. So we got that. Black Flag. What the? Another head scratcher for me in terms of, I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't say, "Oh good, here we go. Here's the greatest album cover of all time." But also if I'm building a list of the worst ones, this guy doesn't make my first cut by any
No,
stretch.
I have to assume that it's because Black Flag's logo, the black bars, which are meant to look like a flag, that is iconic, and is there's so many people wearing Black Flag t-shirts who probably don't even know that that's a band. They just have the bar logo. It's been ripped off by so many other brands and artists and things like that. It's an iconic logo, and they also have a couple of famous album covers. The most famous would be probably Damaged, which was when Henry Rollins was their singer. It's him punching a mirror and shattering the mirror. It's an iconic album cover. So I think that this is probably just because they have famous album covers and logos and things. So this is subpar for them. But I totally agree with Kelly. Why I don't like this. This wouldn't make my list.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, see, this is what I'm talking about. If you're gonna be doing bad album covers, Roger, it's the many faces of Roger, which I would argue it's not that many faces.
No.
It's kind of the same face pointed different directions for the most
Yeah.
part.
And it's, you know what? Honestly, from a design perspective, considering this came out in 81, this is not bad. Like the text inside of the O, the Roger in the middle with the different images and stuff around it. Like this is something you would actually expect to see in like the 90s. There was a lot of similar album covers to this. So from a design perspective, this might be a little bit ahead of its time. I'd argue Roger's the problem with the album cover.
Yeah, I think you've got to be doing. And I apologize. I said the many faces of Roger. It's the many facets of Roger. But my original comment still stands
Yeah.
that it's the same facet with his face pointing. Roger's a goof. That's his
Yeah, it's
facet.
him pulling the same weird face from different angles. So that Roger's the problem, not the concept of it.
Yep. Because I'm not seeing multiple facets here.
No.
And the facets I'm seeing, I don't like. So,
Yeah.
And but one smart move is sticking with Roger because his last name's Troutman, and that just may not have gone over too well. Oh, so uh, George Jones, I want to sing. I want to be Thomas the Tank Engine as a bus
Uh,
with. I don't know if George is a big. I don't think George was mostly a drinker. I don't know if he was into to other things, but based on this cover, I think he must have been given those eyes because there's some stuff going on with Roger.
this is bad. This is a laughably bad album cover. I will say, and this isn't. I'm not a big George Jones guy, but country music of this era just they look these albums look like shit. Like there's just so many terrible album covers. So I would argue this is almost you could swap this out with almost any of his contemporaries albums as well. It's usually some kind of like garish colored logo. Like this is it looks like yellow and orange for the logo with some terrible idea like this for the design. So I don't know who was in charge of this, but I assume it was like one guy who knew all the country guys who they'd be like, "Hey, you got an album cover for me?" And he just like smoked meth in his trailer and come up with this. So I this is terrible, but I think it's indicative of country records at that time
I hope not. This is horrible. It's just horrible. All righty. Um, Two Live Crew, as nasty as they want to be. Um, Props to Two Live Crew for appropriate placement of eyeline. I think I gotta give them credit. you know, I gotta imagine this wasn't the only photo taken. They
they
say,
made the
yeah,
right
this is the one
choice.
we need to go with. Um, uh, not a cover that celebrates the strong woman. I would would argue.
Disagree. They're towering over them.
That's true. Um, uh, yeah. I mean, this is they got a call from REO Speedwagon, said, "Hey, we got this cover. We're awesome." And they said, "Hold our beer." and they win.
Okay. So
This is one.
I'm gonna diverge with Kelly a little bit on this one. If I were to make a list of the greatest album covers of all time, this would be on there.
Oh,
I think I think this is one of the best album covers of all time.
oh, here we will have to agree to disagree.
So the ignoring the album itself is famous and iconic now because of what happened in its wake. I don't know if you're familiar, Kelly. This was actually banned by the government. This album. It is the only album in American history that was banned. So you could not legally sell it for a very brief period, and they got that overturned and became heroes of free speech because of it. But this was banned by a judge. You were not legally allowed to buy or sell this album in certain parts of the country for a couple days or whatever, whenever the Supreme Court got involved. But it was a huge deal. So this album is iconic because it's a big deal for music and for censorship. It also has "Me So Horny," which I would argue is the greatest ballad of all time. And I did argue because it was one of my papers that I submitted in college that Two Live Crew created the postmodern ballad with "Me So Horny." So I did argue that. Also, the design. So going back to the design part of it, this design style, which unfortunately I can't remember the name. There's a name for this. The way that the colors are and the text is layered and everything became a really big thing for a while in the '90s, particularly Miami bass records and stuff like that. So they're if not originators, one of the early groups to do a style of music called Miami bass, and this really took off as what their album covers look like. Even Vanilla Ice, who's another early Miami bass guy, his first album is very similar. His first album cover to this, even with the girl on the cover and everything. his first album, Hooked. So this is a thing that became a style of album cover for quite a while afterwards. So I have to disagree. Plus, I'm not mad at the album cover.
Yeah. So part of it, I mean, lacking the deep artistic education that you have over our listeners and me, I will say I'm not sold on the saturation of the photo. Just I'm going to take away just kind of just a photo as a photo. I don't. It's grainy to me. It's grainy. The saturation's not right, and it smacks to me of um, when an alluring female form was intended to be depicted on the Commodore Amiga. There was who had very limited colors to work with. There was this attempt to round out portions of the body and with a few with this limited shading type of things and to me quite unsuccessfully typically and this smacks of that a little bit too, but we'll just
It
have to
is a
agree.
grainy.
What's that?
It is a grainy photo.
Yes, it is. Pat Kelly, Lonely Man, go figure, you know. Lonely Man with a sense of style. The orange possibly suit, maybe jacket and pants and black checkered shirt. Um, head on a rock. Um, I get why he's lonely. The shoes look kind of cool though. Give him that.
Yeah, the shoes are interesting.
But um, I have composition issues.
Yeah, the composition's terrible. The way the lettering and everything is laid out, but more importantly for me, I mean this the juxtaposition of these colors, it hurts to look at it.
Yes. No. It I would agree. Yeah, that it is I mean, why isn't the letter drop orange? You know, I mean, why'd you have to go pink? But it hurts. You're right. Ah, many people have called him this era's Mozart. Corey Feldman, angelic to the core. Um, couple of Halloween stripper angels helping helping Corey out of video game fire pit, and possibly the worst uh, attempt at flames via Photoshop I've ever seen on the sides of this, and some clip art banner on the top. Uh, so, and lettering on the bottom feels like what someone would have done in a late 90s website. So at least the letters aren't on fire. That would have been so. There's not much right about this to me. You?
So this is when most people found out that Corey Feldman was a musician, not me. I go way back with Corey Feldman. Um, Corey Feldman, of all the people who've randomly spent time at my grandparents' house when I was a young man getting involved in music, Corey Feldman was the weirdest who ever hung out at my grandparents' house. Weird guy, but I've been aware of Corey Feldman as a musician since his first album came out many years before this. I've met Corey Feldman a bunch of times. I have a signed thing of his he signed when he was at my grandparents' house. Just weird stuff. Weird guy. But we've crossed paths many times. And this is so it's terrible. It's not the worst Photoshop job I've seen because Creed albums exist. So, and I believe at least one of those is on this list, if I remember correctly, much further up, as it should be. So, it's not as
Yeah,
bad as
so
a
you may
Creed
not say
album.
it's the worst, but it's in camp bad. I mean, you
Oh
gotta.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad. I understand. So just because I know what the album is, I understand what this is supposed to be. But I feel like if I didn't, so this is a double album concept record of Heaven and Hell. with one album being heaven, one album representing hell. So I know that. So I understand what this is supposed to be. If I didn't know that, though, I don't think that I would.
I think I could pick that up from the cover, not being familiar with the material, that could be. I mean, I wouldn't be able to nail exactly, oh, this is a double album set and set, but I get the juxtaposition because of the blue above the banner. I think Heaven's kind of cheated on this. There's a lot more hell than heaven going on this
Yeah, hell
cover.
is way more represented, which feels right.
Yeah, and it's got the angels, so it's a it's a thing,
I
but
so I think it's supposed, and it's hard because the Photoshop is so bad. I think so. You're not really getting the depth you're supposed to get from the picture. I think it's supposed to be the angels are pulling him out of hell. So they're like flying in the air. Imagine if it was done better, pulling him behind them, like lifting him up. It doesn't seem that way because it's all flat and ugly because the Photoshop's so bad. No offense, Corey, but it's all
yeah,
flat and ugly with bad Photoshop.
yeah, and with their feet appearing to be firmly planted in
Yeah,
the doesn't well what you can see. I mean, there's like one
right.
couple feet missing. There's some problems,
Yeah,
but
one is just missing feet altogether,
yeah,
and one's missing a whole leg. It looks like.
not good.
Yeah, it's poorly done, but because I know what it's supposed to be.
Ozzy Osbourne, Down to Earth. Um, High school photo from Ozzy. This I think was his graduation photo. um, uh, for Ozzy looking pretty good. I think a little this back when he was lighter and all that. Uh, um, not a back to the the record store that people are probably not familiar with that are listening or watching, but I walk by, I see this. I'm probably moving along pretty quickly. Um, I kind of like the color choices a little bit, but but yeah, it just to me is this is kind of meh. Uh, I'm not 100% sure I'd put it on the worst list. Not great for me. How about you?
So I don't like it. I've never liked this album cover. I do like the coloring. I agree with Kelly on that. I think the colors are nice. It's got kind of this cool blue gray kind of hue to it, with the red logo kind of standing out over that. So that's cool. It's for anybody who hasn't seen it, or if you're not watching the video part of this, it is a X-ray of Ozzy that is distorted to make him. I guess he's supposed to be like a crucified monster. It's stupid, but this is another one where it probably wouldn't make a worst list for me, even though I don't like it. And going back to what we've mentioned a couple times, so Ozzy album covers suck. If you his first couple of albums, he's wearing like silly Halloween costumes. One of him with like fangs and furry hands, and another one where he has like the devil ears, but they have like the strap around them that's visible and stuff like that. And even my favorite Ozzy album cover is a silhouette of him with terribly photoshopped eyes and mouths and stuff over him. So I would argue that all of his album covers are awful. So this is this is in line with his other albums, not better or worse.
Yeah, the Apple Watch product placement bugs me a little bit too. But okay, Lionel Hampton, Hampton, Paris, the hamster. Uh, the Vive la France in there, kinda. Um, Unlike the previous album color, and I'm not a big fan of this color selection on this one.
No.
Um, I would think also if Hamp was saying, let's make sure my face is on this album and let's pick a flattering image of me to to do this
Nailed it. No
this
notes.
is not it.
No, no. This is jazz for the eyes.
I guess I don't like jazz. So, I mean, so props on the Eiffel Tower, kind of subtly, sort of, kind of sketched in there. So I'll give that
I
some
think
some
it's only
props.
subtle because it's just so busy and crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a just you're kind of assaulted from there.
Yeah.
But to me, this looks like a guy who hates white mice, and there was a pen full of starved boa constrictors that someone just dumped 2 dozen white mice in. That's the facial expression I see,
I get that.
which I guess is a thing. James Brown, reality, ironically, title album for this cover. Uh, Again, a discovery of layering here is present. Someone's done that. Um, I would I would say this also, and this is not, oh, there's a bunch of white rats being eaten by ravenous snakes in this look here. I'm not sure what this look is. I guess this look is like, so there's not going to be a second lobotomy. I'm not, I'm not sure because James Brown, if nothing else, um, is a man of high energy. So I don't get that here. And so again, this is one where I don't find it impressive at all. I don't know if I put it on a worse list, but it's definitely one that would not make me pause walking by.
It looks
Your
like
thought?
one of those bad tribute like t-shirts that people get made when someone dies and they go like to the shore and get an airbrushed
Yeah,
sort of image of them on a shirt. That's what this looks like. And it's weird. The only thing I'll say, like, just like Kelly said, it's bad, but I don't know if I put this on a worst list. I don't like it, but I think the weirder thing about it is just James Brown is somebody who understood the visual side and the showmanship side of music as well. So you'd think he'd have a better eye for that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. And the underrated airbrush artists of the county fair. I feel these are some of our greatest artisans. This does look, to your point, like there was an airbrush booth that, well, all we got left is browns and oranges. Someone said, I want a James Brown shirt, and there you go, you got it. David Crosby, if I could only remember my name. Um, Again, we're just judging the art. We're not judging the appropriateness of the title and backstory with Mr. Crosby. Um, Mike picks on me occasionally, accuses me of body shaming or being critical. I don't think I would lose an argument when I would say the less of David Crosby's face you see, the better. And so in that case, good move on this one. It's it's semi-transparent and it's not all of it. Um,
It's still a lot of face though.
it's a lot of face. It is a lot of face, but it's hard to take it all in because it's fairly transparent. Um, I think the missed opportunity to not put the sun in the eyeball, but that's me.
And actually, that really bothers me that the sun doesn't line up with the eye because it feels like it's off. And
That's what they
it
wanted to
really,
do, and it was like,
yeah, it should be lined up with the eye, like from a design. It's still stupid, but like it would look slightly better
yeah,
from a design perspective because now it just feels like it's off a little bit. But do you remember or have you ever seen Reader's Digest albums?
no,
So Reader's Digest used to make albums that you could get, just like you could get the Reader's Digest books. Reader's Digest Kids was a like book magazine thing, and you would get an issue and it'd have a couple of articles, and then it would have shortened like Cliff Notes versions of books. So you would get like this thick thing that would have some articles, then have like two short versions of novels that were out at that time, kind of thing. It was weird. And they used to also make compilation albums, just like they made these compilation books. I don't think those lasted as long as the books. Books were their main thing, but they would make these compilation albums, and I swear this is every cover of them. It's always like a sunset or sunrise with like some semi-transparent image layered over top of it. I have a couple, and they're all some variation of this. So if I didn't know this was like a studio album by him, I would think this was like a Reader's Digest compilation.
Yeah, it just does smack me. And so we, on some of the thumbnails we do and other things where we're doing some layering and stuff, or I'm trying to do a thumbnail and get a couple things dropped in, and I get some of the initial images and I've done some resizing and stuff. This feels to me like that was done and someone's like, oh crap, I didn't make the head the right size to be able to slide the sun behind the eye. Ah, screw it. We got to get this done.
It's close enough.
Yeah, it's in the ballpark. And the last one, a good strong one to end for today. Little Flip, the Leprechaun, a double CD, 20 tracks. Parental advisory.
So so I love Lucky Charms cereal. Um, Going back to the coup, this is what I meant when I was. So if you're not familiar, this era of rap albums, awful, awful, just hard to look at Photoshop with just crazy, weird choices of things. So this is the kind of stuff they were trying to parody. So it almost feels like redundant to have both of those.
Yeah. Um, I mean, they they capture the spirit of Lucky Charms visually. The visual dictionary
Right, right.
is strong. uh, but that's about it.
Yeah. And this is, I hate this cover. And I remember seeing this in record stores. This album was successful. This was this was Lil Flip's commercial peak. So this was a fairly successful album. I remember seeing this in Best Buy and Tower Records and things like that. Again, looks terrible, but is pretty indicative of what was popular for rap album covers around this era. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
still better than any Creed album cover though. Everything we've looked at is
it's
better
better
than
than.
any Creed album cover or the album itself, but definitely better than the album covers.
Yeah. I think the thing that there's a lot that bothers me about this one. There's a lot I don't like, but I think the fact that um, the hat is at a minimum the brim, but I think the whole hat's photoshopped on.
Oh yeah.
Um, and to me, if you're gonna do that, you give him a better hat than that. If you had the latitude that this is, I don't like the hat. I don't like anything on here, but I really don't like the hat.
If you look, the dimensions of the body aren't quite right either. So I think the
No.
whole thing is photoshopped.
Yeah.
It's his head photoshopped onto
Yeah.
that.
It's a thing, that's for sure. Well, that's 50 through 26. That's where we're going to stop for today, but not quite yet because we're going to um, provide a couple album covers that are not on this list that Mike and I have selected. We'll start with Mike's Summer Breeze by Piper. Explain
Yep.
yourself.
I really like Piper. Um, they're a Japanese city pop band. City pop music is a weird genre of Japanese music where bands, usually very proggy technical bands, were making music inspired by Western imagery, but like what they thought it would sound like, music that was set in those locations, not inspired by the music itself, but their interpretation of the imagery that went along with it, which is a weird place to start from. Um, It's a popular genre among anime enthusiasts because a lot of old animes would use city pop music as their soundtracks, or at least as the opening title music. Piper, in particular, is a cult favorite in this group from anime stuff. And also, too, I would say if you listen to Summer Breeze and you're a retro gamer, some of this is going to sound familiar to you. I think this is a really great album, a really strong album. It's been reissued many times. I absolutely hate the album cover. Like many of the bands we've mentioned on this list, I don't really like any of their album covers, if I'm being honest. And city pop stuff had a lot of cool imagery, and Piper just was not on board with it for some reason. There was a better way to do this album cover if you wanted a Western surf scene. But again, I guess the contextless nature of the music and what they were going for, I guess this kind of works. I don't like it. I don't like that shirt. I don't like the way the guy's standing. I don't like anything about it. Love the album though. If we do a prisoner exchange in the future, this is going to be one
Oh, no, so we've already got a head start on the cover review for when we do the prisoner exchange.
of them.
Yeah, this is a clunker. I'm there's something seriously wrong with the lower half of his left arm. And so
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out if that's just, a deformity that I'm mocking him for unnecessarily, or whether this is actually like an 80-year-old man that they Photoshop the hell out of everything else to smooth it out. But there's something going wrong there. But that's just the fly in the ointment of a really bad ointment on this one. So
I really wish the album cover was just white and it just said Summer Breeze Piper, like the logo that's on the side.
yep,
If that was just the album cover, I'd be fine with it
that'll work
over
too.
this. Yeah.
All right. So this is one I've walked around with almost my whole life. Herb Albert, the Tijuana Brass, whipped cream and other delights.
There is so much to look at here.
There's a lot. Um, it My parents own this album. and it scarred me from the moment I saw it. It just there's just I it just if you bring up wrong in the dictionary, I think this album cover is one of the photos I'll use to illustrate that. Um, yeah, I just really, really am disturbed and dislike this cover. And so when we're going through worst album covers, I go, this one I just can't seem to shake. I just can, and I started thinking worst album covers just immediately came to mind. So I had to share it. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to see this fine piece of art.
No, no. And here's the thing. There's parts of this that I kind of like if you take them out of context. Like I like the font. I
Font's
like
good.
the juxtaposition of the two fonts. I like putting the text kind of in the bubbles and stuff. Like from a design perspective, that looks nice. Like if this was just the back of the album and there was no woman on it, and they just had like the title like that, and then the song titles listed that way, like that would look okay. I don't love the green, but still, that would kind of look okay. But then you put all of this on the front, including the label and the catalog number and everything. It's a lot to read right on the front of the album cover, which isn't a great idea. And then the image is just hard to look at because there's so many things going on in it. The proportions are off. And if they had real whipped cream on her, the whipped cream that's on her head wasn't. That was something that was put on the picture, and then the picture was photographed because they didn't have Photoshop back then. So it's a different contrast to the rest of the picture. And yeah, it's not pleasant to look at. This is a great choice for bad album covers.
Yep. Yeah. So take that, Rolling Stone.
Yeah, how is this not on the
Yeah.
list?
Kick your Tom Petty off. Drop this bad boy in.
I get Piper. Piper's kind of a cult band from Japan from the 80s. So maybe that's not what they were going for. But how is this not
Oh, this
on that list?
Yeah, this is not unknown. There are a number
Yeah.
of copies of this around, so they couldn't have missed that. But We'll see. All right. Well, like I said, this is a little bit different than some of the stuff we do usually. So very interested. Any of you have stuck around, let us know in the comments if you like it or not. If you take issue with any of our selections so far. If you really liked it, be sure to like and actually, if you liked it or hated it, you should like and subscribe to the Bog Panda YouTube channel because you'll either know when the next one comes out to rush out and watch it or avoid it. So, see, we got you covered either way. So, please consider subscribing to the channel. Once you subscribe to the channel, and actually, even if you don't, but please do, you'll be able to listen to Hard No, the world's shortest podcast, delivered to your interwebs daily. And then finally, take a spin around our merch store, which none of these album covers will be available on. And but there'll be some cool stuff out there you should check out. Any final thoughts, Mike?
I would say, as bad as both of our choices were, they're still better than any Creed album cover.
Bog Panda.